Thank you for joining us. I'm Krista Grinderlens, and this is my father, Michael Grinder. And today we're going to be talking about learning styles. Now, before we begin,
please,
I think we just need to acknowledge that there's some controversy over learning styles.
Yes.
But what we're going to talk about today is that you don't have just one learning style.
Right.
And in fact, we're just going to keep it simple to 3 learning styles.
Yep.
Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so what we're saying is that you have all 3 in you. We're going to talk about how do you tap into the learning style needed in that moment.
Yep. Whatever the task is.
Right.
Yeah.
So that goes back to a story we share.
Please.
When I was, I always struggled with reading, but when I was...
You inherited certain things from your dad quite well.
Thank you so much. Well, okay, not that part. I'm not thanking you for that part, but it did help me as an educator, though, because then I could relate to my struggling students. And then I became a reading teacher of all things, which is so strange because, but then I could break it down.
Right.
And one of those things was with reading. In 6th grade, I had a very visual teacher, and I was an auditory learner by my
repeating.
Natural.
My
natural way would be repeating and creating cassette tapes inside my head.
Yeah.
So my grades started to fail, and I would get super nervous and sick before each test, even though I studied and studied and studied.
And you did, yeah.
And then you're like, I might as well let you tell the story, but I only have it from my viewpoint is like, okay, something has got to change because it's not a lack of effort.
No.
Do you want to go into a little bit on that?
And I would like to add, it's not a lack of intelligence, so that people know it's not a question of IQ. It's a question of style and methodology. So when she would do preparation for multiplication tables, she would have 5 times 1, 5 times 2, 5 times 3, all the way through 5 times 12. So if the test said 5 times 6, she would start off with 5 times 1, 5 times 2. And so it would take her forever to get to 5 times 6, then she'd put down 30. So she had everything memorized in terms of cassettes. So we had to figure out how do we get it out of the sequential order and make it each fact independent. So when it said 3 times 8, she can go 3 times 8 is 24, which is different than 3 times 1, which is a lot better than 8 times 1, 8 times 2. So that's what she learned, and you did it extremely well.
So then we started going, okay, if my natural studying is to go auditory, and yet when I got to the test, it was visual, and it was timed, which was against me going through, like you said, all of it to get to the 5 times 8, starting with 5 times 1. We started saying, okay, well, what about a visual learner? And how do they study their natural way of studying? That maybe I could tap into that natural way.
Right.
So I could then, as I'm studying, which is the input to storage, I had to store it visually instead of auditorily.
Yes.
Correct?
So you first learned it sequentially. So once the learning gets in, now you store it differently. So a way of thinking about it is she would have her 5 times 1, 5 times 2. She'd have her 5 cards. And what we did was after she knew all the answers, then we would just switch the order of the cards. And that's what visual people do automatically. But you can mechanically do it outside your brain. And it makes it so much easier to do. So daily work is auditory. A test is visual. What's the difference? Sequential versus change of order.
And with that, I had to learn how to store it visually. So even if it goes out of order, which would mess up my auditory tape inside my head, or CD, or however I stored it, right?
Yeah.
I had to then go quickly looking at what I'm studying and store it inside.
Right.
I think we should actually go into that right now in terms of what the mechanics was that then you can try at home as well. And where is my body, or my nonverbals, to be able to store that information inside my head so that then I could retrieve it in a visual manner. And now I have it auditorily and visually, which then helps in both ways, because if I'm going through something and it's an auditory feedback, I've got it that way. And if it's on paper and it's visual, I've got it that way as well.
Both.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you okay if we go into?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do
Sounds
it. Let's
good.
do it. So, if you think about whenever you learn something, normally you will repeat it in the same order that you heard it, same order that it was presented in. Once you have that knowledge down, now the question is, how do you change these order so you can pull the things out in any way you want? Example, you have very young 5-year-old, they're A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that's a whole set. How do you get it so you know what comes before and what comes after a letter? You can say what comes after D, and everyone goes, it's E, because it's going in that direction. But if you ask what comes before D, change of order, they can't do it. So one of the things that teachers do is they will take and put down on a floor each individual card of A, B, C, D, and then you have 2 lines of students competing with each other.
Oh.
And the teacher shows the letter or says the letter, and they have to race to put their foot on that letter, and you now broke up A, B, C, D, and now they're each individual.
Yeah.
What a difference.
And I know with my grandchildren, it's so funny because they can sing the song no problem. But then you go back to, okay, well then, like you're saying, okay, well then what comes after S? And they just look at you like, wait, A, B, C, D, you know.
I'll get there eventually.
Yeah, and even, well, at the age of 4, they sing the whole alphabet and they go, did I get it? You know, because it must be in there somewhere, right? So it's breaking it down.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to do now is we're going to break the video and show the physical aspect, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. We're going to have Michael sit in a visual capacity storing way. You'll notice his feet are planted on the ground, and then his knees are at a 90-degree angle. And then his legs to his torso are at a 90-degree angle. And if we go all the way back here, you'll see he's not even touching the chair, right? It's because it's all the way up. And then his chin is going to be parallel to the ground. So again, kind of his neck and chin are at that 90-degree angle. I am going to then model something going up that he's going to memorize. And I'm going to hold it up, watch his eyes. I'm going to wait until his eyes go up, because this is storing visually. He's going to take an image of this, and you can see as he blinks, that is like his picture image. Yes. And then with that, we would take that visual away, and we'd have him reopen his eyes, look back up, and then tell us what is it that he sees. If you are doing something such as mathematics and trying to do the memorization of multiplication, you could have a triangle with all 3, and then you cover up one of the 3 numbers. So let's just say that you have 5, 4, and 20. We now know 5 times 4 is 20, but you take away the 20 and he sees the 5 and 4. The relationship between 5 and 4 goes with
20.
Yes. And then you could take away the 5. We have the 4 and the 20. We're now doing the next segment, which is multiplication to division.
Got it.
So not only are we memorizing these 3 numbers, fact families is what they call it, for multiplication, we're doing it for division. So if I cover up the 5, he sees the 4 and the 20. Yeah. What's associated with 4 and 20?
Yeah, the missing member of the family is 5.
And so then you would reveal that 5. Yes. Anything else you want to add to this?
When it's really, really important, sometimes you have to sit in the first third of your chair and your back is even straighter. Try to keep your hands off of any support, whether it be the arms of the chair or your desk. Try to keep your hands free.
That was fun. We hope that that can be a segue to you when you're studying for something that you're going to be visually responsible for the output of, right?
Yep.
But with that, both of us being educators and being a reading specialist, one thing that has come up with the science of reading is understanding and digging deeper into knowing the rules and the sounds and how to blend. So if someone is going visual with learning the spelling words and memorizing their spelling words, we're not talking about doing the stored visually for everything or right off the bat. We're talking about understand the meaning, understand the background, how it connects, and like I think you helped me in terms of I would first learn it auditorily because that's how I naturally did. But then we would say, okay, how do I store it visually? So when I get into the classroom, and that was the second step. So input, storage, and then output.
Got it.
And how do we show, like you said, it's not IQ. How do we show our intelligence in the manner that they're asking us to, which could be different than what we are, okay. So with the science of reading and whatnot, we're saying have the students understand, give them the tools. So if they come up with a word that they don't know, that they could sound it out. But it's when we're trying to build fluency for those words that they need to know right away. How do we build their fluency after they understand? Right?
I got to see your son teach in another city about 3 weeks ago, first grade. And he came up with a very clever thing. They have these certain words that you can't sound out. You just have to know. They call them the red letter. And so what they did was when they were doing their writing, if they did one of those red letters, they got to take their pen and walk up to where the Post-it was and put their initials on it, because I know how they do with that now. So color coding, reinforcement, reward. Oh man, it's so helpful for people to know they're smart.
Well, thank you. Thank you for doing this with me. And I hope that the listeners out there can tap into this and use it in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for being yourself and knowing who you are, and make sure you know you're smart.
Absolutely.